Okay, hi everybody. This is a little 10-minute or so video to prepare everybody for session 3 and also to give you a sense for what kind of exercise we'll be doing in the session so you can prepare for that exercise. So this is just a quick reminder of the basic definition of intimacy that I shared in the first session. It's sort of foundational, so I like to repeat it every now and then. Intimacy is an interpersonal process involving two individuals engaging in repeated reciprocal exchanges of vulnerability and responsiveness. And we take each of the terms in that definition seriously. And the important point is it's not defined by specific relationship types. It can apply to romantic partners, friends, family members, coworkers. And for our purposes, importantly, it can apply to our relationships between each other and our relationships with our clients. So this is the model that we've been going over, and I will just briefly walk you through it one more time and then set up how we're going to work with it in more detail on Tuesday. It starts with awareness, and we want awareness of ourself, what we're feeling, what we need, what our values are, balanced with awareness of the other person. We could call this empathic accuracy. And awareness of the context in which the interaction is taking place, because of course different relationships, different contexts call for different kinds of behaviors and different ways in which vulnerability and responsiveness is expressed. And for our purposes, what's important is that it's not just any kind of awareness, but we're really talking about a mindful awareness, gentle, non-judgmental, present moment awareness in the moment of the interaction. So we can bring this awareness to bear on our behavior. And the first kind of behavior that we talked about is this idea of emotional expression. And we practiced in our first week providing safety in response to emotional expression. And we largely did this with the eye contact exercise. Here are the basic definitions of emotional expression and providing safety that we went over in the first week. We were practicing authenticity and vulnerability in our emotional expression, and providing safety is sort of a long definition, but we can think about safety in both nonverbal and verbal terms. And nonverbally, it's really important. How are we expressing safety with our eye contact, with our faces, by nodding, with responsive touch as appropriate? And then how are we expressing safety verbally with indicators of synchrony, interest, and care? Simply saying, "You are safe with me." And then really importantly, this idea of reciprocal vulnerable expressions. We need everyone to be engaging in vulnerability reciprocally in order for safety to develop. So as I said, this is just a reminder to remind you that in the first session, we did this eye contact exercise and we moved towards a single word verbal disclosure of our identities. And we practiced doing that with each other and experiencing how all of that felt as a group. We also talked after the exercise about the obstacles that show up in this situation. And the primary obstacles are first, lack of awareness. We're just not aware of what we're feeling, or we're not aware of what the other person's feeling. And that, of course, interferes with our ability to express what we're feeling and our ability to provide safety in response to the other. And then our feelings can get in the way in two ways. We can be kind of feeling too much, dysregulation, or suppressing and not feeling enough. And both are problems in terms of emotional expression that we can work on. And the same set of obstacles really shows up on the responding end. And so we want to work on these obstacles over and over again in our work. It's really foundational that we're able to express our emotions in healthy, regulated, non-suppressed ways with respect to both providing safety and expressing vulnerability. Okay. This week, we're going to start talking about the second subrelation of self-disclosure and validating in response to the self-disclosure. And then in future weeks, we're going to talk about this third subrelation of asking for what you need rather than just talking about yourself, asking for things. And then rather than just validating, really listening to the need and giving people what they have asked for. And then throughout, we will also be talking about this fourth subrelation, when somebody has engaged in vulnerability and the second person has provided a response, it's now this first person's task to accept that response. Sometimes we just call this connecting. And we have this arrow back to vulnerability from accepting the response to highlight that often accepting a response and connecting in response to somebody is really one of the most vulnerable things we can do in relationships. It's sort of the pivotal moment when intimacy can move forward in a relationship. We have a choice to accept a response, to connect with the other person, to express appreciation and gratitude and affection. And all of those things can be really difficult for people. So that's the model in a nutshell. It's just a review. This Tuesday, we're going to start talking more specifically about this second relation. And here's the definition. The first thing to know about the definition is that it follows from the first relation of emotional expression. So we want our self-disclosures to be congruent with what we're feeling. Emotionally congruent, authentic self-disclosures. And then there are these 4 different categories, and we're going to talk about each of them in our course together. This week, we're going to focus on negative events, memories, and feelings. And then in later sessions, we're going to talk about positive events, memories, and feelings. We're going to talk about disclosures of identity and values. We already did one of those in the first week. And then disclosures of gratitude and affection, which really map onto this idea of accepting the response with the arrow back into vulnerability. And we'll be practicing that throughout. Now, on the other side here, validation. We want to practice validating in a really explicit and unambiguous way. This is what we're going to practice, really making our validation explicit and strong so it can function like that $1 million suitcase rather than the $5 bill. So unambiguously conveying that your partner's self-disclosures make sense and are valid, focusing on verifying the underlying emotional experiences and aspects of self and identity. So that's the definition. That's what we'll practice. Okay. On Tuesday, we're going to do an exercise on disclosing of negative events. And what I want to say here with this slide is that we are going to practice disclosing negative events in order to enhance intimacy and connectedness, not necessarily to help the person get over or process the event. The research on this is actually complicated. Disclosing negative events to others doesn't necessarily help them get over or process the event any faster, but it does have clear benefits with respect to feeling closer and more connected to the person, feeling less isolated and alone when bad things happen, and things like that. So that's how we tie this into our model of intimacy rather than our model of processing or getting over negative feelings. Take a look at these 5 questions for a second. I'm going to ask you in groups to share a response to one of these 5 questions. And if you're willing, I'm going to encourage you to do number 4. Tell your partners, there should be an R there, tell your partners about one or more key emotional events in your life, experiences or aspects of your history that have shaped who you are. The way we'll do this on Tuesday is I'll go first, and I will share some stories about my childhood with all of you. I'll actually bring some pictures that I'll show you to bring these stories to life, and I'll model it and go first, and then a couple of you will have a chance to respond to me. And then you guys will get into small groups, and you'll do this with each other. We'll set you up in little breakout rooms in the Zoom meeting in groups of 3, depending on if everyone's here. And the way this will work is each person will act as the client first here in green, and the client will have 5 minutes to respond to one of those questions and tell a story. And the encouragement will be to share the story with a vulnerable, emotionally congruent way, the way that we're trying to cultivate in the CRB2 kind of fashion. And then after those 5 minutes, each of the 2 people in the breakout room will have about 2 or so minutes to respond to the response. And then after these 9 or 10 minutes, we will switch, and then another person will be the client. And so there'll be 3 clients total. The whole exercise will take about 30 minutes or so. What I want to highlight here is that when we're doing these exercises together, we want to be practicing working within these relations. And from the perspective of responding to somebody's self-disclosure, I'm going to encourage you all to keep a couple of questions in mind. When responding, how connected are you feeling to the client's needs for safety and validation, and how able are you to really focus on safety and validation? And I've circled validating and giving in a yellow highlight here, because I want people to really notice any, in their own awareness, any impulses to give instead of to validate. And by giving, I mean trying to make the person feel better, to fix how they're feeling, to problem solve, things like that. One of the things that often goes wrong in intimacy is somebody's self-disclosing and really just needs to be seen and heard and understood, but the responding person really wants to try to fix or add or change the emotions. And all of those responses really show up in this third subrelation. So we'll be talking about this more, but for now I just want to highlight that when we're responding, we're going to really try to work on providing safety and validation and noticing any understandable impulses to give. Oops. Okay, that was a little preview of the pictures I'll show you there, but I won't do that anymore. For now, I just want to go back to this slide here and end things. So these are the 5 questions. If you really want to talk about a negative event memory or feeling in a way that does not map onto one of these 5 questions, that's fine. You can choose to do what you want, and you always have choice. If you're willing and in the right frame of mind for it, I'm going to encourage people to try number 4. But again, it really is your choice. I want you to step outside your comfort zones in ways that feel right for you. And I can certainly help and talk to you about any of this as we go. Okay, so that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Come to class with questions about this presentation. I am not going to go over the presentation again. I'm hoping we can just jump right into questions about the presentation to save us some time, and then we'll do the work together. Okay, I hope everyone has a good weekend and